and some Vancouver weather. I've been telling all the tourists, it's never like this usually. You guys have just had the worst luck in terms of getting some rain in Vancouver. I think the idea of traveling to broaden your perspectives is still valid, it can still be done, but it's harder now just because we've been swamped. Cheap airfare has transformed tourism and has democratized it, which is great for a lot of people. It's just that it isn't great for a lot of the destinations. And in some ways, it's not great for the experience. You know, now you've got a situation where going somewhere and truly appreciating a place becomes difficult simply because the place itself has been transformed by the crowds that have descended upon it. So we are our own worst enemies when it comes to travel and tourism. In a way, we're destroying the very thing that we want to appreciate. It's easy to pick on cruise ships, and I do. It's not something that I would be attracted to. For one thing, I don't like the idea of a cruise ship because it's such a directed form of travel. It's like, we are going to babysit, we are going to take you here, you are going to be here for an exact amount of time, and then you're going here, and that's just the antithesis of the way that I like to travel. In terms of their environmental footprint, it's not good. But I was talking to a fellow named Giulio Mattioli, who's a real expert in aviation emissions and so on. And he wasn't defending cruise ships, but he was pointing out that a lot of people who roll their eyes at cruise ships and say they're environmental disasters will then board a plane and fly over the ocean. And in fact, that's as big a contributor to emissions as anything else. Long-haul flights are serious contributors to emissions. So you can't really be too smug about cruise ship passengers when it comes to emissions if you yourself are flying over, from Vancouver and taking a couple of hops over to Rome. The idea of travel as status, it breaks down into a couple of different categories. There is, of course, the Instagram traveler. And that's a way that, in some ways, the travel has become a way of saying, look at me, look at my fabulous life. And I think if you take it at face value, it can encourage the most shallow form of travel. The get there, take the selfie, check the box, and go. It's been pointed out, in the book, a woman named Dr. Ulrike Gretzel points out to me that I'm being somewhat unfair to Instagram influencers because some of them are serving a very useful purpose for travelers, and really they're just serving the same purpose that a lot of travel journalists used to serve. But nonetheless, I do think that there is a sort of an ethos surrounding Instagram travel that can encourage a kind of shallow form of travel. The other thing, when you're talking about status, it reminds me of, this is just sort of off the top of my head, I don't know if you remember the story of the star-bellied sneetches, Dr. Seuss. The sneetches have stars on their bellies, they're the ones with status, and then the ones without. And a guy comes to town and says, I can put stars on any belly, and then the first ones want to take the stars off so that everybody trying to separate themselves from the mob. Well, it used to be back in the day that you could, travel and that was your sign of sophistication. Well, now everybody's traveling, so what do? Well, maybe you go to space, right? Space tourism now. You have to find some other way to make travel into a signifier of status, because it's not, when you're looking at a packed flight full of people wearing flip-flops, it's not status anymore. So you've got to do things like go to space, or tragically dive to the Titanic, and you have disasters like we had with the Titan submersible. And the people, I was just again this morning, and this is not new now, but I was looking again at a long queue of people lined up to get to the summit of Everest. And the truth is that when you're near the summit of Everest now, you are going past an ever-changing landscape of frozen corpses. People die. And, again, this is one of those things, I'm going to separate myself from the pack by going up to Everest. Well, you are in a lineup now that is longer than the lineup at Katz's Delicatessen in New York just to get to, again, here again, this idea that it's a marker of status, doesn't really hold true anymore. I bought into, this is a story I tell in the book. I was in Palermo, as they say, and I bought into my own mythology. I was looking at this surrounding, I was near the Capo Market, and I thought, here I am. I truly am the romantic traveler, the man of the world, Peter Lorre, Charles Boyer. And then just at that moment, a tour group turned into the alley with the woman with her paddle leading her ducklings along, and my illusion just popped. I realized, you're no different than these people. Get over yourself, we do like to play roles when we travel. I think, we like to pitch ourselves as a certain kind of person, but, the fact that travel is as easy as it is now means that we're just not really having the same kind of experience that people used to have in the days of the Grand Tour, when travel was a much more arduous undertaking than it is now. I mean, you can see the political debate that's happening over Airbnb, and if nothing else, that tells you that it's a complicated question, because tourism, as I say at one point in the book, tourism doesn't just consume, it feeds. And there are benefits, there are tremendous economic benefits from tourism. And when you say, okay, we're going to crack down on Airbnb, you are possibly impeding tourist flow. It's possible that you are going to suffer for that. On the other hand, as a renter, I applaud anything that's going to get more housing stock back into the rental market. So I'm torn. I don't think that Airbnb is in and of itself some sort of evil. But I do think that when it is uncontrolled, you get these situations where you have an operator, say in Barcelona, who's got 10,000 rooms. And this is really just an unlicensed hotel chain operating as under the guise of Airbnb. And I do think that sort of thing has to be stopped. But how far do you go? I would hope that we could find some sort of balance where Airbnb still finds a niche and can play a role in tourism, but hopefully without completely distorting the housing market. And that's the balance that they're trying to find right now. When you look at, you look for who influenced you as a writer, and you might want to say, oh, it was Jane Austen, it was Thomas Wolfe, it was Dostoevsky. When I really look back on who influenced me as a writer, I look back to the fact that I used to read Newsweek magazine religiously in the 1970s and early 80s. And one of the things that I loved about Newsweek magazine is they would have feature articles on very serious subjects, and they always made you laugh. Some point in the article, they would always drop in these witticisms. And it wasn't until many years later that I looked back and said, if anybody influenced you as a writer, it was probably Newsweek magazine, because I really do think that humor, is, Mary Poppins said, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And I think that humor isn't just for comedic novels or comedic stories. That humor is a very useful tool when you are trying to tell a serious story or trying to get people to look at a serious issue. It really helps if you can make them laugh once in a while. My focus has changed a little bit, and it's partly, I guess, getting old. Not really proud of this, but the thing is, I always had a philosophy on my previous trips that I would go somewhere that I knew and liked, and I would go somewhere new. And I try to cling to that. But I have to say, as time goes on, I get more and more drawn to just going back to the places I love. There are places that I've discovered that I love so much that the idea that I can't go back to those places anymore would be very painful. So I'm getting more conservative in my travel philosophy as I get older. I want to go back to Bangkok and go back to my favorite haunts in Bangkok, and I want to go to Tokyo, and I want to go to Rome. Now, hopefully, I won't completely lose any sense of adventure, and hopefully I'll go somewhere else, because that's the thing, is it's so much about novelty. And when you're somewhere seeing something for the very first time, and that's really where the magic of travel often kicks in.
Thanks very much, Steve. I appreciate you braving the rain and coming out here to meet me.
Rain in Vancouver. Who'd have thunk it?